Good morning. I'm probably just going to read a couple chapters today because I have got a lot of work to do, but I didn't want to miss out. So here we go. This is going to be the Prince Warrior's Unseen Invasion, Chapter 12, Left Behind. You know, that's the thing that always kind of scares me because I don't want to be left behind. Okay, Xavier burst in the back door of his house and raced up the stairs to his room. He knew he had to hurry. He headed straight for his closet, where his seed was still wrapped in a shirt. Unfortunately, over the last several days, he had thrown a whole lot of other clothes on that shelf as well, so it took some time to sort through it all to find the one that contained the seed. He unwrapped it, sighing in relief. The seed seemed to be glowing faintly. That was new. Xavier, what are you doing? I thought you texted me and said you were going to Manuel's house. Mom's voice called from the hallway. Is everything all right? Sure, Mom, said Xavier, stuffing the seed in his jeans pocket. He dashed toward the door, but found his way to the stairs blocked by his mother, who was holding a laundry basket. I just had to get something, he explained. See you at dinner. He brushed by her quickly and headed down the stairs. Wait, Mom called out. Xavier stopped at the bottom step, groaning inwardly. While you're here, would you do me a favor and run down to the basement and grab a few jars of tomatoes? I'm going to make some sauce for dinner. Can I do it later? I'm kind of in a hurry. No, Xavier, I need it now. It will only take a minute. But, Mom... Do as your mother says. Startled, Xavier whirled around to see his father sitting in his favorite chair in the living room, his laptop perched on his outstretched legs, like it usually was whenever he was working from home. Xavier hadn't even noticed him sitting there when he hurried past earlier. He automatically straightened up at the sight of his father. It was something of a natural reflex. Your mother should never have to ask you the same question twice, son. Yes, sir, Xavier responded respectfully. He raced down the hall to the basement door and flew down the stairs. It wasn't until he got there that he realized he had no idea where his mother kept the jars of tomatoes. Great, he muttered to himself. While the other kids are having adventures in a horror toss, I'll be hunting for tomato jars. He pulled the cord of the single bulb light overhead and started making his way into the dark, unfinished basement. His dad had plans to fix it up as a game room for Xavier and his brother someday, but he had been so busy with work since they'd moved in that the project seemed to have been forgotten. The basement gave Xavier the creeps. It was more like a cellar with dank concrete walls that smelled funny. It reminded him a lot of the prison under the Fortress of Chaos. He rummaged through a bank of cabinets that held old games, camping gear, Christmas decorations, and some stuff for making candles, from back when his mom had been interested in candle baking. No tomatoes. He passed by a stack of boxes. One of them was labeled Xavier's First Year, full of mementos like his first tooth and a lock of hair from his first haircut. Gross. He had no idea why his mom saved that kind of stuff. Finally, he came upon a shelf that had rows of odd-colored vegetables marinating in jars, like a mad scientist's lair, he thought to himself, laughing a little. He looked for the red ones, but there was quite a few different kinds. He wasn't sure which were tomatoes and which were something else, like peppers. He picked one of the jars off the shelves and examined it. He saw tiny seeds, which could be tomato seeds. It reminded him of the seed in his pocket. He glanced down to make sure that it was still there and gasped. His whole pocket was glowing, like it was on fire. He felt his heart race. Was the seed going to burn right through his pocket? He reached in tentatively and pulled out the seed. It was warm, but not too hot, and glowing very brightly, bathing all the jars on the shelves in an eerie red light. Xavier blinked several times, wondering if he was imagining all of this. Before he could even think about what to do with the glowing seed, one of the jars fell off the shelf and crashed onto the concrete floor at his feet. Xavier jumped back, startled. Had he done that? Now there was a mess, a big mess. of shattered glass and tomato goop on the floor. He'd have to get something to clean it up. But before he could move, he heard a soft rumble and the gentle clanging of glass jars. He looked to see that the shelf itself was shaking. He reached out to steady it, but the shaking just got worse. Was it an earthquake? He pushed the seed back in his pocket so he could use both hands to steady the shelves. A jar fell. Xavier caught it and tried to put it back, but soon another jar fell, slipping through his fingers. It hit the floor, splattering glass shards and icky vegetables all over him. "Mom!" he called out. He needed to warn her about the earthquake. As more jars lost their balance, he abandoned the shelf and turned to head for the stairs. The light went out. He wondered if the light bulb had been shaken out of its socket. He was in complete darkness. The rumbling continued. Xavier took out his phone and turned on the flashlight icon so he could see what was going on. The shelves were still shaking, making more jars splatter on the concrete floor, but nothing else was moving. The rest of the basement was quiet. This wasn't an earthquake at all. "What's going on?" he said aloud. None of this made any sense. He reached out to grab one of the quivering shelves to make it stop, but his hand went right through it, as if the shelf were no longer there. A hole had appeared in the middle of the shelf, swallowing up the jars as it expanded. The hole, Xavier realized, went right through the thick concrete wall, so that the light from his phone shone into empty darkness beyond. A dim pinprick of red light appeared in the middle of the darkness, capturing his attention. It grew steadily larger, like the headlight of an oncoming train. After a moment, he could make out what it was. The crest of a Horitos, glowing bright red, growing larger and more distinct against the curtain of black. "Hurry, Prince Xavier," said a voice. Xavier knew instantly whose voice that was. Still holding the seed, he jumped through the hole in the wall, running as fast as he could toward the light. "Xavier!" Xavier's dad came down the basement steps and looked around. He was sure he had heard glass breaking. Everything was quiet and intact. He walked over to the shelf of canned vegetables. No Xavier. One jar lay broken on the floor, its contents spilled out over the concrete. Xavier's dad frowned, puzzled. He bent down to pick up the glass pieces and noticed a footprint carved into the spilled tomato juice, a footprint with the grid pattern of a sneaker, and it was facing the shelf, as if Xavier had walked right into the shelf that lined the wall. Xavier's dad stared at that footprint a long time. He wondered, could it be? As he picked up more shards of glass, the spilled juice on the floor began to move, as if an invisible finger was running through it. Xavier's dad held his breath as the drawing finally took shape, forming itself into the unmistakable crest that he had known from long ago. Xavier's dad knew then where his son had gone. He smiled to himself, cleaned up the mess, and picked out 2 more jars of tomatoes to take upstairs. He'd have to tell his wife that the boys might be late for dinner.